The frontier world of Kepler 442b stretched endlessly beyond the perimeter of their temporary base camp, its alien landscape painted in shades of amber and crimson by the light of twin suns that never seemed to set in quite the same place twice. Captain Marcus Webb stood at the edge of the defensive perimeter, studying sensor readings that told him everything and nothing about the planet that had swallowed an entire research colony without leaving so much as a distress signal. Atmospheric conditions remained stable, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the communications station they'd erected in the center of camp. No change in the electromagnetic anomalies we detected yesterday. Marcus nodded, his attention split between the tactical displays and the striking figure of Commander Zaralin as she emerged from the Altarian section of their joint camp. Even after 2 weeks of working together, he found himself momentarily distracted by her presence. The way she moved with fluid grace that made human coordination seem clumsy by comparison, the luminescent quality of her skin that shifted subtly with her emotions, the pointed ears that seemed to catch sounds his human hearing couldn't detect. "Captain Webb," she said in her precisely accented standard, approaching with a data tablet that showed the day's search patterns. "My teams have completed their survey of the northern quadrants. No traces of the missing personnel, but we did encounter several anomalous energy readings that warrant investigation." Marcus accepted the tablet, noting how their fingers brushed during the exchange and trying to ignore the way the brief contact made his pulse quicken. "Anomalous how?" "Structured patterns that suggest artificial origin," Zaralin replied, moving to stand beside him as they reviewed the data together. "Not recent, possibly ancient, but still active at low levels." The discovery was significant enough to require immediate planning, but Marcus found himself distracted by Zaralin's proximity. Her luminescent skin glowed more brightly when she was focused on complex problems, and he begun to recognize the subtle color shifts that indicated different emotional states. Right now, she showed the cool blue-white that typically accompanied deep concentration, but there were hints of warmer tones that he was learning meant something else entirely. "We'll need to coordinate approach vectors," Marcus said, forcing himself to focus on tactical considerations rather than the way her hair caught the alien sunlight. "If these energy signatures are connected to what happened to the colony, then we may finally have answers," Zaralin finished. "But also potentially the same dangers that forced their evacuation or—" She didn't need to complete the thought. Both teams had been operating under the assumption that the research colony had met with disaster, but the complete absence of bodies, wreckage, or distress communication suggested something more complex and possibly more sinister than simple catastrophe. "Evening briefing in 2 hours, Marcus decided. "We'll plan the approach for tomorrow's mission." As Zaralin returned to her duties, Marcus caught himself watching her interact with her personnel, the way she listened to reports with complete attention, how she managed cultural differences between various Altarian subspecies, the quiet authority that made even experienced soldiers eager to follow her orders. Command suited her, and he found her competence as attractive as her more obvious physical qualities. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, appearing at his elbow with barely concealed amusement, "you're staring again." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. "I'm observing our alien counterparts' operational methods." "Aha," Kim replied with the kind of familiarity that came from years of serving together. "And I suppose Commander Zaralin's operational methods require particularly close observation." Before Marcus could respond with an appropriately commanding rebuke, alarms began echoing across the camp as perimeter sensors detected incoming movement. Both human and Altarian personnel responded with practiced efficiency, taking defensive positions while scanning for threats that could range from hostile wildlife to enemy forces. "Multiple contacts approaching from the eastern ridge," reported Sergeant Martinez from his sniper position. "Large, moving fast, but they don't read as mechanical signatures." Marcus grabbed his rifle and moved toward the perimeter, finding Zaralin already there with her own weapon, elegant energy weapon that seemed to respond to her bioelectric field. Her skin had shifted to the pale gold that indicated heightened alertness, while her pointed ears swiveled to track sounds he couldn't hear. "Indigenous predators," she said without looking away from her scope. "Pack hunters, probably attracted by our electromagnetic signatures." What emerged from the alien vegetation was unlike anything in human xenobiology databases, creatures that seemed part reptile and part energy being, their forms shifting between solid matter and crackling electricity as they moved with impossible speed across the broken terrain. "Weapons free," Marcus called, while Zara Lynn issued similar orders in her own language. "Defensive positions, watch your crossfire." The battle that followed was brief but intense, requiring human and Altarian forces to coordinate their very different fighting styles against enemies that defied conventional tactics. Marcus found himself fighting alongside Zara Lynn, her energy weapon complementing his kinetic rounds as they covered each other's positions with instinctive cooperation. "Behind you!" Zara Lynn called, spinning to fire at a creature that had flanked their position while Marcus was reloading. "Thanks," Marcus replied, returning the favor when another predator tried to exploit her weapon's charging cycle. When the last creature had been driven off or destroyed, the camp fell into the kind of exhausted silence that followed successful combat. But Marcus realized that somewhere during the fight, his awareness of Zara Lynn had shifted from professional respect to something more personal and immediate. "Casualties," he called, beginning the post-combat assessment routine. "2 wounded, neither serious," reported Dr. Foster from the medical station. Whatever those things were, they seemed more interested in our equipment than our personnel. "They were testing us," Zara Lynn said, approaching Marcus as they supervised the defensive perimeter reset. Pack predators typically probe defenses before committing to serious attacks. Marcus nodded, noting how her luminescent skin was slowly returning to normal colors as the adrenaline faded. "How long do we have before they try again?" "Unknown," Zara Lynn replied honestly. "But they will try again. These creatures are persistent when they identify valuable territory or resources." As evening settled over the alien landscape, Marcus found himself looking forward to the briefing session with anticipation that had nothing to do with tactical planning. Working with Zara Lynn was proving to be one of the most professionally satisfying experiences of his military career, but it was also awakening feelings that military protocol strongly discouraged. The question was whether she felt the same growing attraction, or whether he was misreading Altarian social cues in ways that could compromise both their mission and their working relationship. Either way, he was beginning to understand that this assignment was going to challenge more than just his tactical skills, it was going to test his ability to maintain professional boundaries when personal feelings threatened to overwhelm his better judgment. The evening briefing took place in a command tent, a utilitarian structure that housed communication equipment, tactical displays, and the kind of cramped workspace that military operations required. Marcus had intended it to be a standard operational review, but with Zara Lynn sitting across from him in the lamplight, her luminescent skin casting subtle patterns on the tent walls, he found his attention divided between mission planning and the growing awareness that their professional partnership was evolving into something more complex. "The energy signatures my teams detected today form a definite pattern," Zara Lynn said, manipulating the holographic display to show topographical data overlaid with electromagnetic readings. "They appear to be arranged in a geometric grid extending across several square kilometers." Marcus studied the data, noting how the detected anomalies formed precise angles and measurements that couldn't be natural formations. "This looks like some kind of technological network. Possibly defensive, possibly surveillance." "My thoughts exactly," Zara Lynn agreed, leaning closer to highlight specific readings. "If the missing research colony encountered this system and triggered some kind of automated response, it would explain why they disappeared without sending distress calls," Marcus finished. "But it also means we're potentially walking into the same trap." Their tactical discussion continued for over an hour, but Marcus found himself increasingly distracted by details that had nothing to do with military planning. The way Zara Lynn's ears moved when she was concentrating on complex problems. How her skin's luminescence brightened when she was excited about a particular tactical insight. The unconscious grace with which she moved, even in the confined space of the command tent. "Marcus," Zara Lynn said suddenly, using his first name for the first time since their mission began, "are you finding it difficult to concentrate tonight?" The question caught him off guard, both because of the personal tone and because it suggested she'd noticed his distraction. "I'm sorry, Commander." "Long day," I suppose. Zaralyn, she corrected gently. And yes, it has been a long day. But I don't think that's what's affecting your focus. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks as he realized how transparent his attraction had become. Commander, Zaralyn, I want to assure you that my personal observations won't interfere with our professional relationship. Zaralyn's luminescent skin shifted to warmer tones that he was learning indicated amusement or pleasure. Your observations, she repeated with what might have been a smile. Is that what you're calling them? Before Marcus could respond, Lieutenant Kim's voice crackled through the comm system. Captain, we're detecting movement on the perimeter again. Same energy signatures as this afternoon, but in greater numbers. The tactical crisis that followed required all their attention as both commanders coordinated defensive responses to what appeared to be a more serious probing attack than the afternoon's encounter. The creatures seemed to have learned from their previous attempt, approaching from multiple vectors and using the planet's natural electromagnetic interference to mask their movements. They're testing different sections of our perimeter, Zaralyn observed, monitoring sensor readings while directing her personnel to reinforce vulnerable positions. Looking for weaknesses in our defensive grid. Marcus coordinated with human units while keeping track of Altarian positions, noting how naturally he and Zaralyn had fallen into a command partnership that transcended normal military hierarchy. Their different approaches. His focus on systematic defense and her intuitive understanding of predator behavior complemented each other in ways that made their combined response more effective than either could have managed alone. There, Zaralyn said suddenly, pointing to a section of their defensive perimeter where sensor readings showed unusual patterns. They're trying to create a diversion while the main pack flanks us from the north. Marcus saw it immediately once she pointed it out, but wondered how long it would have taken him to recognize the tactical pattern without her insight. All units, reinforce northern perimeter. Don't let them draw you toward the false targets. The battle was more intense than the afternoon's encounter, requiring both species to coordinate weapons fire and defensive positioning under pressure that tested their hastily developed joint protocols. But Marcus found himself fighting alongside Zaralyn again, their combat partnership flowing with the kind of intuitive coordination that usually took months to develop. How do you do that? Marcus asked during a brief lull in the fighting, genuinely curious about her tactical instincts. Do what? Zaralyn replied, recharging her energy weapon while scanning for new threats. Read their behavioral patterns so quickly. See tactical opportunities that I miss. Zaralyn's skin brightened with what he recognized as pleasure at the compliment. Altarian military doctrine emphasizes understanding your enemy's psychology rather than just their capabilities. We study motivation, instinct, the emotional patterns that drive tactical decisions. And what do you see when you study human psychology? Marcus asked, then immediately regretted the personal nature of the question. Zaralyn looked at him directly, her golden eyes holding his gaze with an intensity that made his pulse quicken. Complexity, she said softly. Contradictions that somehow create strength. The ability to adapt and innovate under pressure. And she paused, her luminescence shifting to warmer tones. Unexpected depth beneath surface behaviors. The moment was interrupted by the all-clear signal as the last of the attacking creatures withdrew to safer distances, but Marcus found himself thinking about her words long after they completed their post-combat assessments and dismissed their respective teams. Later that evening, as the camp settled into the quiet routines of night watch and equipment maintenance, Marcus found himself unable to sleep despite the exhaustion that should have made rest automatic. The stress of command, the unknown threats surrounding their mission, and his growing attraction to Zaralyn combined to create a mental state that made sleep impossible. He was reviewing tactical data on his portable tablet when he heard soft footsteps approaching his tent. Military discipline made him automatically reach for his sidearm until he recognized the distinctive sound of Altarian movement, lighter than human steps, with a rhythm that suggested someone moving with deliberate stealth rather than hostile intent. Marcus? Zaralyn's voice came softly through the tent fabric. Are you awake? Come in, he replied, setting aside his weapon and trying to project casual professionalism despite the way his heart rate had increased. Zaralyn entered his tent with the fluid grace that seemed natural to her species, but Marcus noticed immediately that her usual military bearing had been replaced by something more uncertain, more vulnerable. Her luminescent skin glowed softly in the tent's dim lighting, and he could see emotional patterns he was learning to recognize as indicating nervousness or anticipation. "I couldn't sleep," she said simply, settling onto the camp chair across from his cot. "Too much to think about. Today's encounters, tomorrow's mission, the implications of what we might find." Marcus nodded, understanding the feeling completely. "It's a lot of responsibility. Decisions we make here could affect relations between our species for decades." "Yes," Zaralyn agreed, but something in her tone suggested she was thinking about more than just political implications. "Marcus, can I ask you something personal?" The question sent a jolt of anticipation through him, though he tried to keep his expression neutral. "Of course. In human culture, when two people work together closely, when they develop understanding, is it considered appropriate to acknowledge personal feelings?" Marcus felt his mouth go dry as he processed what she might be asking. "That depends on the circumstances. Military protocol generally discourages personal relationships between officers, especially during active missions." "But after the mission?" Zaralyn asked quietly. "When the professional obligations are fulfilled?" Marcus looked into her eyes, seeing hope and uncertainty that mirrored his own feelings. "After the mission, people are free to pursue whatever relationships they choose." Zaralyn's luminescence brightened noticeably, and her smile was radiant. "Then perhaps we should focus on completing our mission successfully." As she prepared to leave his tent, Marcus found himself hoping that their growing connection would survive the return to normal duties and the scrutiny that an interspecies relationship would inevitably attract. But for now, it was enough to know that the attraction he'd been trying to suppress was mutual, and that the most challenging part of this mission might not be the unknown dangers of an alien world, but learning to navigate feelings that transcended every boundary between their species. The discovery came at dawn on their 18th day on Kepler 442b, when combined human and Eltarian search teams finally located the source of the energy anomalies that had been haunting their sensors since arrival. What they found changed everything about their understanding of the missing colony and the true nature of the threat they faced. "It's a control node," Dr. Elena Martinez reported from the excavation site, her voice tight with excitement and concern. "Pre-colonial, possibly ancient beyond any historical record we have. The energy signatures we've been detecting are emanating from a vast underground network." Marcus and Zaralyn stood at the edge of the archaeological site, studying readings that suggested a technological infrastructure spanning hundreds of square kilometers beneath the planet's surface. The implications were staggering: an automated defense grid that had apparently remained dormant until triggered by the research colony's activities. "This explains everything," Zaralyn said, her luminescent skin shifting through colors that Marcus had learned indicated rapid cognitive processing. "The missing personnel, the lack of distress signals, the complete absence of physical evidence. You think the defense grid activated and somehow, what? Transported them?" Marcus asked, though the idea seemed impossible even by the standards of advanced alien technology. "Or eliminated them so thoroughly that no traces remained," Zaralyn replied grimly. "Either way, we're potentially facing the same automated systems that our predecessors encountered." The tactical briefing that followed was unlike any Marcus had conducted during his military career. They were no longer searching for missing personnel or investigating a simple disappearance. They were confronting evidence of a planetary defense system that operated by rules they didn't understand and couldn't predict. "We have 3 options," Marcus told the assembled team leaders. "Evacuate immediately and recommend that the planet be designated off-limits. Attempt to deactivate the defense grid using our current resources. Or try to establish communication with whatever intelligence is controlling these systems. Each option carries enormous risks," Zaralyn added, her command presence evident as she addressed both human and Eltarian personnel. Evacuation might trigger the same response that eliminated the research colony. Attempting deactivation could be seen as an act of aggression. And communication assumes there's still an active intelligence rather than simply automated systems following ancient programming. The discussion that followed revealed the depth of trust and coordination that had developed between the two command teams. Human tactical thinking combined with Altarian intuitive insights to analyze options that neither species could have evaluated effectively alone. There's another factor, Dr. Martinez added reluctantly. The control node we've exposed appears to be responding to our presence. Energy levels are increasing, and the harmonic patterns suggest some kind of activation sequence. Marcus felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling on his shoulders, decisions that could affect not just his team's survival, but potentially the relationship between human and Altarian civilizations. But when he looked at Zara Lynn, he saw the same determination and careful consideration that had made their partnership so effective. "We need to make this decision together," he said, addressing both commanders. "Our species, our protocols, our responsibility." "Agreed," Zara Lynn replied without hesitation. "Whatever we choose as partners." The word partners carried implications that went beyond military cooperation, and Marcus found himself thinking not just about their current crisis but about what their relationship had become during weeks of shared command and growing personal connection. Their planning session extended late into the evening as they worked through contingencies and communication protocols for each possible course of action. But as the tactical discussions wound down, Marcus realized that Zara Lynn's presence in his command tent had become as natural as breathing, the way she moved through his space with unconscious familiarity, how their conversations flowed between professional and personal without conscious transition. "Marcus," she said as they completed their final review of tomorrow's operations, "regardless of what happens, I want you to know that these weeks have been significant for me." The admission was offered quietly, with the kind of vulnerability that Zara Lynn rarely allowed herself to show. Her luminescent skin glowed with warm tones that he'd learned meant deep emotional engagement, and Marcus felt his own heart rate increase in response. "For me as well," he replied honestly. "I've never worked with anyone whose judgment I trusted more completely." "Is it just professional trust?" Zara Lynn asked, moving closer until they were sharing the same breathing space. Marcus looked into her eyes, seeing reflected there the same questions and possibilities that had been occupying his thoughts for days. "No," he said simply. "It's not just professional." The moment that followed was charged with weeks of suppressed attraction and growing emotional connection. Marcus found himself studying the delicate patterns in Zara Lynn's luminescent skin, the way her pointed ears moved when she was processing complex emotions, the graceful strength that made her presence so compelling. "After tomorrow," Zara Lynn said softly, "after we've dealt with whatever we find in that control node, would you be interested in exploring what this could become?" Marcus reached out to touch her face, marveling at the warm glow that seemed to emanate from her skin. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Whatever the challenges, whatever the complications, yes." Their first kiss was tentative, exploratory, a meeting of species that had evolved under different stars but had found common ground in shared values and mutual respect. But as Zara Lynn's luminescence brightened in response to the contact, Marcus realized that what they were building together transcended the biological differences between their people. "Tomorrow we face unknown dangers," Zara Lynn said as they separated, her forehead resting against his. "But tonight, we're just two people who have found something worth protecting." Marcus nodded, understanding that their relationship had reached a turning point that would affect everything about how they approached not just their mission, but their futures together. "Tomorrow we're commanders responsible for our team's safety. Tonight, we're Marcus and Zara Lynn, figuring out what it means to care about someone from another world." As they sat together in the quiet of his tent, planning for a morning that could bring either breakthrough or disaster, Marcus realized that he'd found in Zara Lynn something he hadn't even known he was looking for, a partner who challenged his assumptions, complemented his strengths, and made him want to be worthy of the trust she'd placed in him. The ancient defense grid could wait until morning. Political implications and species protocols could be addressed later. For now, it was enough to sit in the lamplight with someone who understood both the weight of command and the courage required to open your heart to possibilities that transcended every boundary the universe seemed determined to place between different worlds. Tomorrow would test their tactical skills and their ability to navigate dangers that had eliminated their predecessors. But tonight was theirs, a quiet moment of connection before facing whatever challenges an alien world could devise to test their partnership and their growing love. The ancient control node came alive at 0347 hours local time, its awakening announced by harmonic frequencies that seemed to resonate through the planet's crust and into the bones of every person in the expedition. Marcus woke to emergency alarms and the distinctive glow of Zaralin's luminescent skin as she appeared in his tent entrance, already dressed in full combat gear. "The defense grid has activated," she reported without preamble, her skin flickering through rapid color changes that indicated extreme stress. "Dr. Martinez estimates we have perhaps an hour before whatever happened to the research colony happens to us." Marcus was already moving, grabbing equipment and weapons while his mind raced through tactical options they'd planned but hoped never to implement. Evacuation status. Both teams are ready for immediate extraction, but the energy patterns suggest that leaving the planet's surface might trigger an aggressive response, Zaralin replied, following him toward the command post where both human and Altarian personnel were monitoring systems that had suddenly become incomprehensibly active. The next hour tested every aspect of their partnership as they coordinated response protocols while facing technology that operated beyond their understanding. The ancient defense grid wasn't simply activating, it was scanning, analyzing, and apparently making decisions about how to deal with the current occupants of what it considered its protected territory. "It's trying to communicate," Dr. Martinez reported from her position at the archaeological site. "The harmonic patterns aren't random, they're structured, mathematical, possibly some form of data exchange." "With what?" Marcus asked, then felt his blood chill as he realized the implications. "It's scanning us. Learning about our technology, our capabilities, our numbers. The question," Zaralin said quietly, "is whether it's evaluating us as threats to be eliminated or as intelligences to be communicated with." The answer came in the form of a holographic projection that materialized in the center of their camp, a complex geometric pattern that pulsed with the same frequencies they'd been detecting from the underground network. But within the mathematical structures, both commanders could detect something that looked almost like language. "It's trying to establish communication protocols," Zaralin said with growing excitement. "The patterns are adapting, becoming more complex as it learns from our responses." What followed was the most intense negotiation of Marcus's career, attempting to communicate with an artificial intelligence that had apparently been dormant for millennia but retained perfect awareness of its original programming. Through painstaking trial and error, using mathematical concepts and logical structures that transcended language barriers, they gradually established basic communication. The intelligence revealed that the missing research colony had indeed triggered its defensive protocols, but rather than destroying them, it had transported the entire human population to a protected habitat elsewhere on the planet. The system had been designed not to eliminate intruders, but to preserve life while protecting ancient technological resources from exploitation. "Where are they?" Marcus asked through the complex translation interface they'd developed. The response came as coordinates and imagery showing a vast underground complex where the missing colonists lived in apparent comfort and safety, but under the constant supervision of automated systems that prevented them from accessing or damaging archaeological sites. "They're alive," Zaralin breathed, her luminescence brightening with relief and amazement. "All of them, safe but essentially held in protective custody." But the intelligence wasn't finished communicating. It had been evaluating their expedition not just as potential threats, but as examples of unprecedented cooperation between species. The joint human-Altarian mission represented something the ancient civilization had never encountered, different species working together rather than competing for resources. It wants to negotiate, Marcus realized as more complex patterns emerged in the holographic display. Not just about releasing the colonists, but about establishing formal contact with both our civilizations. The next several hours required every diplomatic and tactical skill both commanders possessed as they worked to establish terms that would satisfy an alien intelligence, protect the missing colonists, and create precedents for future contact between the ancient automated systems and modern galactic civilization. Through it all, Marcus found himself relying on Zara Lynn's insights and intuitive understanding of non-human psychology in ways that made their partnership essential rather than simply convenient. Her ability to recognize emotional patterns in alien communication proved crucial when the negotiations reached critical junctures. "It's offering something extraordinary," she told him during a brief recess in the communication session. "Not just the colonists' freedom, but access to archaeological sites and technologies that could benefit both our species." "In exchange for what?" Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Proof that different species can cooperate rather than compete," Zara Lynn replied. "Our mission has become a test case for whether the galaxy is ready for contact with civilizations that operate on completely different principles." The final agreement required both commanders to make personal commitments that went far beyond their original mission parameters. They would serve as liaisons for ongoing contact between the ancient intelligence and modern galactic civilization, spending months or potentially years learning to bridge the gap between artificial and organic consciousness. "It means extended partnership," Marcus said as they prepared to sign agreements that would reshape both their careers. "Working together on something that's never been attempted before. Is that acceptable to you?" Zara Lynn asked, her luminescent skin showing the warm tones he'd learned meant hope and affection. Marcus looked at her, thinking about everything they'd built together during weeks of shared command and growing personal connection. More than acceptable. Essential. The successful completion of their negotiations was celebrated by both teams, but Marcus and Zara Lynn found themselves alone in his tent as evening fell over the alien landscape. The crisis had passed, the colonists would be returned safely, and their mission had evolved into something far more significant than anyone had anticipated. "So," Zara Lynn said, settling beside him with the comfortable familiarity that had developed during their time together, "we're going to be working together for the foreseeable future." "Extended partnership," Marcus agreed, reaching for her hand and marveling at how perfectly their fingers interlaced despite the differences in their physiologies. "Professional and personal." Zara Lynn's luminescence brightened as she moved closer, her expression showing the vulnerability that she rarely allowed others to see. "Marcus, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have said before." The seriousness in her tone made Marcus give her his complete attention. "What is it?" "This mission, working with you, learning to trust someone from another species so completely, it's changed how I understand what's possible between our peoples," she said, her voice soft but steady. "But more than that, it's changed how I understand what I want for my own life." Marcus felt his heart race as he began to understand what she was trying to say. "Zara Lynn. When I came to your tent that first night, I told myself it was about the mission, about tactical planning and professional coordination," she continued, her luminescent skin shifting through colors that spoke of deep emotion. "But that wasn't true. I came because I needed to be near you, because being apart felt wrong in ways I couldn't explain." She took a shaky breath before continuing. "Tonight, when I slipped past your tent flap again, I realized something important. This isn't about the mission anymore, Marcus. What I feel for you, what we've built together, it goes far beyond professional partnership or species cooperation." Marcus lifted their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently while looking into her golden eyes. "Then what is it about?" Zara Lynn's smile was radiant as she leaned closer, her forehead touching his. "It's about finding someone who sees past all the barriers that are supposed to keep us apart. It's about discovering that love doesn't recognize borders between worlds or differences between species. And it's about choosing to build something together that's stronger than either of us could create alone," Marcus added, understanding flooding through him as he realized how completely their relationship had evolved. Their second kiss was deeper than the first, filled with the certainty that came from facing danger together and choosing each other despite every obstacle the universe had placed in their way. Zara Lynn's luminescence brightened until the entire tent glowed with warm, welcoming light that seemed to celebrate their connection. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked as they separated, both breathing heavily from the intensity of their feelings. "Now we figure out how to be together while we're building bridges between our civilizations," Zara Lynn replied, settling into his arms with perfect naturalness. We'll face skepticism from both our species, political complications that neither of us can predict, and challenges that will test everything we think we know about interspecies relationships. Marcus tightened his embrace, feeling the warmth of her skin and the steady rhythm of her breathing. And you think we can handle all that? Zaralin's laugh was musical, filled with joy and confidence. Marcus, we just negotiated peace with an ancient artificial intelligence, rescued an entire colony, and established first contact protocols that will reshape galactic civilization. I think we can manage the politics of an interspecies romance. When you put it that way, Marcus said with a grin, it does seem manageable. They lay together in the quiet of his tent, listening to the sounds of the camp settling into its new routine now that the crisis had passed. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they began the complex process of implementing their agreements with the ancient intelligence and coordinating the colonists' return to normal life. But tonight belonged to them, two people from different worlds who had found in each other something worth fighting for, worth building upon, worth protecting against whatever challenges the galaxy might devise. Zaralin, Marcus said softly, what you said about this not being about the mission anymore, you're right. It's about us choosing to create something that's never existed before. A love story that spans species, she agreed, her luminescence pulsing gently in rhythm with her heartbeat. A partnership that proves different doesn't mean incompatible. A future neither of us could have imagined when we first landed on this planet, Marcus added, kissing the top of her head and marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. As sleep finally claimed them both, Marcus realized that their mission had succeeded in ways that went far beyond its original parameters. They had found the missing colonists, established contact with an ancient civilization, and created new protocols for interspecies cooperation. But most importantly, they had found each other, proof that the universe's greatest treasures weren't always discovered in distant stars or alien technologies, but sometimes in the courage to open your heart to someone who saw the world through completely different eyes. Their love story had begun with professional duty and evolved through shared danger into something that would challenge both their species' assumptions about what was possible when barriers were replaced with bridges, when fear was overcome by curiosity, and when two people chose to build a future together despite every difference that should have kept them apart.